Hello, so I got 5 books back from CGC. 3 of them were slabs before, and I cracked and pressed them to see if I could get a grade bump. And the other 2 were just ultra high grade books that I was just doing a normal submission on. Of course, I cleaned and pressed all 5 books. So let's get this thing unboxed and see what we got. So the first one is a book that I featured many times on the channel. It is the first published artwork of Todd McFarlane. Now I believe it's a tie for Infinity number 14 between these 2 books. So yeah, hoping to get as high a grade as possible on this. Now this was a slab, and I couldn't see it in the slab before I bought it, but there's a tiny wrinkle. I've got a note here. It says tiny wrinkle crease on right side of front cover. I'm not sure exactly. I don't see it now, but it was there and I couldn't see it in the slab when I bought the thing. So it was a 9.4 when I bought it, and I bought it hoping to get a 9.6 or 9. Obviously, I wanted to get a 9.8. But now I think with that, it might be capped at 9.4, 9.6. So yeah, this is probably going to be a fail. I'm probably going to get a 9.4, 9.6, and probably not get a good value for my money, but that happens. I mean, that's one of the risks we have when we crack and press books. So let's just go and see what CGC thinks. Yeah, we got 9.6, which is a grade bump. And it's still a good investment to have in your collection. First, anything Todd McFarlane related is obviously a good investment. And the first artwork certainly is. So yeah, not disappointed with a 9.6 actually, because after I got it out of the case and saw that crease, I think that's the max grade we can get. And we got our max grade, which can't complain, right? I don't normally do extremely new books. This is a 2020 book. But I think this book has good investment potential. So I got a really good deal on a 9.6 version of this book. And based on the pictures I saw online, I didn't see anything on it. And then when I got it in, it did have a couple bends on it, but I was able to fix those. So this book is pretty much flawless now. So I expect to get the 9.8. Anything less than 9.8, it obviously isn't worth it to do that on this book, so it must be a 9.8. Okay, so we got the 9.8. Right, so I think this book does have quite a bit more value, obviously being an ultra modern book in 9.8 than it does 9.6. So the value I got in this book definitely made it worth cracking and pressing, and I think this is a pretty good long-term investment here, and I'm going to hang on to it and see what it does. But obviously it's a very cool book at the same time. So yeah, very happy to get my 9.8 on that one. So yeah, I've got 3 more here. Now this is another book that I try to pick up whenever I get a good deal. Now I got my Spawn 1 9.8 newsstand already behind me here. If you can see the newsstand. I'm very proud to get that book because that is an extremely hard book to get at all, much less in a 9.8. So I'm good on that book now. So, you know, but I do still submit 9.8 candidates of this book, whether they're direct or newsstand. So this one obviously I think is going to be a 9.8 or else I would not have submitted it. And so yeah, it was a 9.6 I thought before I worked on it. This wasn't in a slab or anything. The Strange Academy was in a slab, and the Coyote was in a slab, and another book coming up was in a slab. But this was not a slab book. This was raw, and so I'm hoping to get the 9.8 on it. And I put on my notes 9.6 to 9.8. Maybe it's borderline 9.6, 9.8. But I've got a couple 9.8 copies already, so it's not the end of the world to get a 9.6 of this book. And for the price I paid for it, which was not much, I only paid $18 for this book. Then even at a 9.6, I'm probably at least breaking even on my money. So let's see. Okay, so we got the 9.8. Yeah, so it's definitely a good investment book as well. Spawn number 1 and a 9.8. Can't argue with that, right? So that's a book you should have in your collection, hold on to, if only just for an investment. But if you love the series, obviously, that's a good reason to have that book as well. So we have 2 more. So we got Web of Spider-Man number 1, another book that I pick up whenever I see it. I went on a frenzy buying this book last year. Whenever I was just picking it up left and right because I didn't have a high grade copy when I was a kid, and you know, I just kind of got addicted to buying this book because it was so cheap still. And most of the copies I got of this book were under $50, but most were in the 15 to 40 range. This was on the upper end of that, and I would expand my horizons a little bit if I thought it was almost a sure 9.8. But you know, there is no sure bet buying online, right? So anytime I couldn't see any kind of defects online, I would pick it up for on the upper end. But regardless, it's still a good investment book, I believe. And even though there's a million of them out there, it's still something that is in high demand. And I mean, the artwork is just awesome on this book, right? So yeah, Web of Spider-Man #1, and I thought it was a 9.4 before I worked on it, and then I thought it would be a 9.8 after I worked on it. And this is one of the higher grade copies that I was able to buy. So I've already gotten 9.8 copies of this book, and this is one of my top 3 books that I submitted. So I'm fully expecting, if I'm going to get a 9.8 on the other 2, which I just had a unboxing a couple weeks ago on that one, this is just as nice, or if not nicer, than those 2 books. So fully expecting we should be getting a 9.8 on this book. Okay, we did. Another 9.8. So very happy about that. And so I think I've got 4 copies, 9.8 copies of this book now, which, you know, it adds some value to your collection when you have that book. You really can't go wrong with that as an investment book, I believe. The last book is the interesting one. Now, this one I submitted through CFP Pressing back originally almost 2 years ago. And it came back a disappointing grade of a 9.6. Now, I say disappointing because it only had 1 defect on the whole book when I submitted it to the presser, and I was just having him firm up the grade, right? Like, I was just get me that 9.8. And when it came back 9.6, I was like, okay, you know, not very happy about that. So I did crack it, and I took another shot at it, and actually there was some waviness and some damage on the book that was not there when I submitted it to him. So this book was actually in worse condition when it came back. So, and I couldn't correct all of that. So hindsight, right? Nothing I can do about that though. So I still think there's a 50-50 shot I could get the 9.8 in this book, but I'm not going to be devastated if I get the 9.6 back. It's just, I've been pretty lucky in these situations so far. So, you know, I know there's no such thing as being due for one to go the wrong way, but I'm totally not going to be upset if this is a 9.6 because it's still a childhood book. I'm keeping it at a 9.6. I'm not selling it no matter what. So it would be nice to have it in the 9.8, but we're going to just be happy and keep the 9.6 if that's what we get this time. So let's see what we got. Wow. Now that one is a huge surprise because this was a 9.6. So this is the one backfire situation I've ever had. I've never had this happen before. Wow, this book is gorgeous. There's that one defect that I can see. Tiniest little itty bitty color break on the spine. And it's so tiny it's not going to show up on camera, but the waviness I was able to get out. I'll have to look at the notes on this one, but this is a 9.6 for sure. So I said I wasn't going to crack it because if it came back a 9.6, but now that I shot myself in the foot and it's a 9.4, I'm probably going to have to crack this one again. I know I paid $1.50 for this book. So, you know, it is my childhood book. I'll just have to reevaluate. I'll have to do it with clear eyes when I'm not emotional about it, which I'm not really that emotional right now, but it is kind of devastating in a tiny little way to get a 9.4 when I was expecting the bottom basement to be 9.6. Not devastated is the wrong word. Disappointed is probably the right word, but that's fine. I mean, it's still a beautiful book, and it is a childhood book. So, you know, 9.6, 9.4. If you don't have the 9.8 in this book, it pretty much is, dollar-wise, is not really that different. But, yeah, I would love to get the 9.8. I really do think this is a 9.8 book. I really do. And it's got 1 defect. I mean, this one up here, 9.8, has 4 or 5 defects. You know, this 9.6 has 7 or 8 defects. This 9.8 Conan over here has 5 or 6 defects at least. All of these 9.8s up here, save for maybe the Spawn, the Web of Spider-Man, and the X-Men 207 have multiple defects. These are 1 or 2 defect books. This is a multiple defect book that got a 9.8. I've got several books that have 3 times the defects that this one has. And I know this is traditionally a hard book to get a 9.8 in, but that back is just flawless. There's nothing on the back, and there's just this one little tiny color break on the spine here. And I know you can get a 9.8 with that. So I'm going to work on this book again probably. I'll make a decision on that in the next week, and I'll probably feature it in a future video and hope we can get at least back to the 9.6, right? So, yeah, this has been fun. I mean, for the most part, this was a really good submission. I got 9.8s on everything I hoped to, except for the Wolverine. And, you know, still came out ahead on the submission, I'm sure, dollar-wise. And, yeah, not going to complain too much. although that is a little bit of a harsh grade, I believe, on that one. But he gave me the 9.8 on the other ones, he or she. So, I mean, you know, I would much rather trade a 9.8 on this one. I'd give up these new, give me two 9.4s here, right? But it is what it is. And so, yeah, we're going to move on from it. And, you know, we all learn from these experiences. And I think, I hate to say that I jinxed myself, but that little speech I gave right before I revealed it, yeah, I kind of set myself up from that one. But you know what? I've been so lucky in cleaning, pressing, and having books graded over the last few months. I have no room to ever complain about anything. If it goes south for the next 2 years, I'm still good, right? I'm still coming out pretty good in this arena. So yeah, so I hope this video has been enjoyable, and we'll see you in the next video.